One of the big topics on this show is the idea of education, and not necessarily educational reform, but what should youth, college age people be learning today that maybe school hasn't tackled well enough? Or, one of the ways that I like to think about it is just if you were given an opportunity to design a school, what curriculum would you want to see in that greatest school that you get to design?
So really, I would have to build it from the ground up. I mean, it needs to be completely changed. I think coping skills would be a huge part of learning for kids. How to cope with stress, how to cope with dealing with other personalities. I mean, you learn that by virtue of being at school and dealing with other kids, but it would be so great if we actually got some actual tools in the toolkit instead of not just failing and making mistakes and the suffering that goes on. So definitely coping skills. The other big one would be investing. And I know that for me, I was taught here's how to write a check. I specifically remember a test where we had to actually fill out a check. And it was here's how to write the dollar amount. And then you sign your name and you date it. And I remember thinking, oh, this is so exciting. This is so cool. Writing a check, it'll be so fun to do when I'm an adult. Now it's no thanks. But they never talked about investing. It's funny. They help you pay your bills, but they don't help you make money. And so investing would definitely be there.
It's interesting that you said right at the end there that they don't help you make money as well as the topic of investing, because it sounds like maybe you consider those one and the same, or are they a little bit different?
Yeah, well, they're very, it's a very different skill set, right? Making money is, especially if you're going to go into business for yourself, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, that is a whole different skill set. But understanding that this is the secret that I wish I had learned, that I wish I had been told at age 17. And sometimes you hear stuff and you're just not ready for it. Like you hear, put 10% away, save 10% of your income. But I always thought, my perception was that investing money is what you do when you get wealthy. Once you're wealthy and you have plenty of money, then what do you do with it? Then you start investing it. And it's the exact opposite. It's you take whatever little bit of money that you can scrape together and you siphon off whatever you can. It doesn't matter if it's $5, and you start putting that into an account somewhere, whether it's a savings account or ideally it's something like today with today's technology, you can invest in stocks, you can invest in crypto. There's all types of places that you can invest your money and have your money working for you. And that's actually how you get wealthy. You don't work to get wealthy by waiting on investments until you're somehow wealthy.
Speaking to my heart, because when you said that you wish it was something that you learned at 17, I was roughly around that same age is who I work with a lot, 16, 17, upwards to 20-year-olds in my kind of day job and what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And about 8 years ago, I found entrepreneurship, content creation, and all of these concepts I started to learn about. And then I was going to work during the day and trying to help them with their homework and being it was so hard to not just be this is just a waste of time. You already know you want to run a photography business. These are the things we should be doing. You already have 80,000 YouTube subscribers and haven't made a penny because it just doesn't, you don't understand how that sort of audience can translate into opportunity. And there was a lot of pain and sadness in my own journey, but mostly seeing youth struggle with figuring this out for themselves. So all of these topics is the whole reason for the show. And I know you know what the show is about a little bit, but at the same time, it's hearing from people who have actually learned it is really valuable. So I really appreciate that. I think one of the toughest things though, is that as people get further along in their own entrepreneurial journeys, we have that sort of curse of knowledge, and then it can be hard to re-break it down for people. So some of the things that you mentioned, like even the definition of entrepreneurship is an interesting one, because if we type it into Google right now as a keyword or look for the definition, we're going to get so many different things. But you use that word. What does entrepreneurship mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I couldn't even tell you what the official definition is. All I know is that I am one. I've been one for a long time. And actually, how that came about. So I'll describe how that came about and why I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. So I always had kind of a employee mindset. I figured that you graduated and you went to school. And interestingly, I wanted to, kind of in your background, I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. That was my absolute dream. And this was before the TV show was even possible, or it was even out. And so I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I graduated and they were like, okay, well, we have no jobs. You could maybe get an internship at the, with the sheriff's department, and unpaid internship, by the way, and see how it goes for a couple years. And then maybe there'll be a position for you. And I was like, yeah, no, I need to make money like now. So at that point, I was also working for a company called LensCrafters, big eyeglass retailer in North America. And they were promoting me. They were really wanted to promote me. So I got promoted to assistant manager and I worked my way up in that company. I became a licensed optician. I loved that job and I got into the training department, and I met my husband and business partner, Richard. And he told me one day, he said, they pay speakers and trainers and people like us a lot of money to go into companies and do training. He's like, would that be of interest to you? Like, would that be something that you would want to do? And I never conceived that you could leave a company and kind of go out on your own. And we were deep into sales training, and we would have conversations about customer service and our philosophies and things like that. And I just hadn't conceived of it. And he was like, yeah, and we could write a book. And at the time, I'm thinking like, this guy's just crazy. Like, he has these wacky dreams, but you know what? I'm going to just roll with it. And luckily I was naive enough to roll with it. I was like, all right, sure. Yeah, let's write a book. I'm thinking we're never going to write a book. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then we started writing this book together, and we were plotting and planning and scheming for several months. And then with no backup plan or safety net, I actually quit first. And we launched this company. We had no customers. We didn't really know how to get customers. We had zero infrastructure. And this goes back to the dinosaur age. So we had computers. It felt like we did. There's like AOL dial-up, and you have none of the tools that you have today. And we figured it out. And so I feel like entrepreneurship is seeing a problem in the marketplace, trying to solve that problem, and not waiting for someone else to say, to kind of crown you and say, okay, yes, here's what we're going to let you do. It's striking out on your own, coming up with a problem that you want to solve, and then figuring it out, right? I mean, that's what it is to me.
When you say not waiting on other people to allow you to get, I guess, validation or seeking support, there are a lot of business, let's say, teachers who have really good information and content out there. Like someone like Daniel Priestley comes to mind, who wrote a whole bunch of books on the topic of like starting your business. And I think actually one is The Entrepreneur Revolution or something like that. A lot of that content instructs people to sort of like take an idea and then go test it or validate it, I think is a word. And I do find that a lot of people get stuck in this sort of validation time warp almost, because they're validating something for 2 years or thinking about it for 10 years and not doing it. I think that ties in really well to a lot of the topics that you discuss. When if you were helping someone start a business and they were wanting to validate it first, what would be your suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's look around and see, are other people successful at what you want to do? That's the big thing. I'll give you kind of a related example. It's kind of a weird example, but one of the side hobbies that my husband and I have is writing fiction. And we also have a problem in that we always like to be different. We don't want to do what everybody else is doing. So we looked at the fiction market. This is several years ago. We looked at the fiction market and we were like, okay, well, we're going to write this type of fiction, but we're going to design the cover really differently. And we're just going to kind of go our own way. And we learned a really hard lesson because we had a spectacular failure. We actually spent a ton of time. And I say spectacular failure, I wouldn't change it because I loved the process, but we still were hell-bent on doing it our way. And so I think that, Tony Robbins says success leaves clues. So what I would encourage somebody to do is look around and say, okay, are other people doing your thing and how are they doing it? And could you maybe replicate that success by trying to follow what they've done and trying not to reinvent the wheel? That's kind of what we did. Even in our business, our speaking business that we started 25 years ago, it was only because Richard looked around and he's like, hey, there are people he's a very talented, gifted speaker. He's looking at other people who are speakers who are traveling to companies. And he's like, I could do that same thing, right? So we knew that success was possible. So I think that's a big part of it in terms of validation, is if you see other people doing it and you are working on the skill, you don't have to have it, right? But you need to, if you can cultivate whatever that skill is, and you can kind of replicate it, then I don't see that you need to sit around and do a lot of validation. Like, just go for it. And, we all talk about how important starting is. Starting is everything. And I think it is in so many ways. Starting is so important. Finishing is a whole other, finishing is huge as well. So that's what I would say about validation. Now, if you have something that nobody's doing, right? It's just this totally crazy, unique idea. Nobody had paired up taking random strangers' cars just off the street and taking, and then you get into it and they take you somewhere and you do it all on your phone. I mean, nobody had come up with Uber. That was like this brand new idea. So there certainly are innovations. And yet, if you've watched the movie about how Uber came about, he was at every turn, he was facing obstacles. Nobody thought it would work. Everybody was rejecting him. Everybody was telling him not to do it. Cities were banning him. I mean, he just had obstacle after obstacle. So the really new ideas, you're going to face a tremendous amount of pushback, I think. And you better be prepared for that. And you better be just completely in love with it. And I think you could maybe test it out, but at some point, even that, you gotta try it.
And my handle on social media used to be Just Tries. And the topic of this show is called Just Keep Learning. It's way better for search. The entire brand is way better now. It's maybe not where it needs to be, but it's way better. But the reason that I first started out with that was I could think of about 50 different reasons as to why that handle spoke to something. And that was really one of them, was that we don't actually know, to the point where sometimes when I'm interviewing people on the show, I'm like, should I just shut down shop? Because the answer is always, you got to figure it out. It's like this growth mindset, lifelong infinite game thing where I'm exaggerating a bit by saying it's not worth interviewing people, because I think there's so much nuance and there's so much we can learn from each other that I would never do that. This has become my life's work. But I say it jokingly because it's almost true that each guest at some point has to kind of say, well, for everybody, we got to just kind of figure it out. And of course, there's a lot of truth to that. The idea of those unicorns like Uber, Airbnb comes to mind. You could even go back to Facebook and Amazon and stuff like that. versus something that's been a little bit more tried and tested, like I want to become an author. There is a bit of a blueprint there, versus some of the like innovative things. And I feel like people often get trapped between those two mindsets almost. Like I am trying to create something super unique and creative that's never been done before, like take people to Mars. Like that's how I succeed as an entrepreneur. As opposed to I want to do something that has been done where there is a bit of a blueprint, and that's where they bounce around. And that's where I'm speaking from experience, because what you just shared about the idea that if somebody else is doing it, then it shows that it is possible for you. I, for the longest time, was looking at podcasts as a great example. I think, well, I can't do an interview show. That's already been done before. And almost using it as sort of like a dream blocker or an excuse, I think, procrastination, etc. When it comes to the idea of, you mentioned spectacular failures. And I loved how you said that word spectacular, because I think that shows sort of like an emphasis of it, and versus just like the small failure. Now, your book is Go for No, or one of your many books is Go for No. When it comes to that topic, because people probably haven't listened to it a lot, how do you summarize that idea of these spectacular failures or small failures, and the idea of really going for no?
Yeah, so the whole essence of Go for No is to look at failure in a positive way, and to actually but to not stop there. It's a very counterintuitive concept, and the subtitle of the book is actually the key. It's yes is the destination, but no is how you get there. And so the whole premise of Go for No is you need to fail more often if you want to be successful. You've got to be willing to fail. You've got to embrace failure on the path. There's no way to get to your destination where you want to go without failure in some form, in some way. So, embrace it. Learn to love it. Because if you're going to spend your whole time avoiding failure and avoiding rejection and avoiding the word no, then you're going to end up with a really mediocre life. You're going to play it safe. You're not going to play to win. You're just going to play not to lose. And so the entire premise of Go for No is built on changing people's mindset around failure, around rejection, around the word no. And I will tell you that, kind of to your point of working with, young people, I was thinking about this the other day because I'm working on this publicity summit that I'm doing, and it was kind of like, why is this your passion? What's like driving you? And I hadn't really given a lot of in-depth thought. I love the idea of helping people overcome fear of rejection and to be willing to hear no. I love it. I'm obsessed with this philosophy, this concept. But I think about like, why? What is it? And I remember when I was in high school trying out for this like girls club, and it was some kind of social club / charity club thing. And we said you had to go be interviewed. And I lived in a very, very affluent neighborhood in Orange County, California. Incredibly affluent. And I was absolutely, for sure, one of the most broke people in that school. and in some cases, homeless sometimes. And so I was always like very kind of hypersensitive about my situation, and didn't want people to find out like how chaotic my personal home life was. So anyway, I didn't wear the right clothes. I wasn't in with the right crowd, but I thought maybe joining this club would be the thing to help me. So I went to the interview, I did it. Then they said, we're going to post everybody who's getting let into the club. We're going to post names on the window. And so I went to the window and I looked at the list of names, and my name wasn't on there. So, and I kind of wasn't surprised, because I'm like, I'm just not one of the cool kids. And you kind of had to be affluent. Like, it's just, again, it was like, who do you know? And who do you hang out with the right people? And do you look the part, which I didn't. It was that rejection that I decided, you know what, F this. I'm not trying out for anything in this school. And as a matter of fact, I hate this school, and I'm just going to pretty much as I can stop coming. And So my sophomore year, I ditched school all the time. My nickname in Spanish class was Truancy. I was just known. Like, I decided that if I wasn't going to fit in, then I was going to be a rebel. And so I rebelled based on that rejection. When I was a senior, I tried out for the dance team, didn't get into that either, but that was actually a good rejection because I wasn't a great dancer. I was actually okay with that. But that like feeling of rejection is so powerful. And I know that we all have those traumatic events, and we especially have them when we're young. And so that rejection teaches us, okay, instead of trying to work through it, I went the opposite way and I did something really negative with it. And luckily I turned my life around, actually. For some reason, I got the bug to be a crime scene investigator. And in college, I just got straight A's. Like, I don't know what weird thing happened to me. I stopped being kind of the bad rebel once I graduated from high school. I guess I looked around and realized, you know what? Nobody cares. So like, do what you want to do. Stop fighting people. You don't have to be the rebel anymore. It doesn't really matter. But that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because I want people of any age, whether you're 80 or whether you're 18, to say, I'm not going to let no stop me. I'm not going to let that rejection hold me back. And in fact, I'm going to use that rejection as a stepping stone. I'm going to try to get more no's in order to get to yes. And that's why it's so meaningful for me.
I often use the kind of concept in my own mind, or if I were coaching someone else kind of through becoming a content creator, starting to put themselves out there a little bit, build a personal brand, to use like a businessy term, but that when they feel stuck like that you just got to find the thing that makes it worth it. Like, that's kind of like, I feel like it could be a chapter in a book. Like, it's worth it, because yeah, it does kind of suck. Like, I hate the idea of even filming a video, but I still try and do it, and that kind of stuff, putting your true ideas out there. And it's worth it to me for a very similar reason, it sounds like, to you, because it was almost giving me chills as you were speaking, because like, there's two big specific reasons for me. One is our oldest daughter is adopted. She, unlike a lot of other adopted kids I've worked with, almost daily, like, she'll come back to, why did my tummy mummy not want me? Like, she brings that up all the time. So her awareness around rejection is really interesting. She's 11 years old now, but that's been a thought for her the whole time. And then a lot of the teens that I worked with, in the city that I live, how we deal with youth who are in institutions, so jail, hospital, we have a crisis center, a school for teen moms, school for addictions, and there's a whole bunch of others, but homelessness, things like that, human trafficking one that's just starting next week. At each of those institutions, they still need high school. And so a lot of people don't think about that, but it's actually at those places that I've been supporting youth and being able to have those really in-depth conversations with them about kind of how they're trying to, anyways, turn their life around. And so much of it starts with some type of rejection, and it might have been in kindergarten, might have been in the 6th grade. As you shared, it might be early high school. It might be in the family or school, but there's so many outside voices that lead to that feeling of I'm not wanted, and then pushing back, and then struggling to kind of fit in. The very extreme version of it that I get to see is the idea of like gangs, and that, they're searching for that identity, and then they find it in sort of like a negative spot. I mean, one could argue it's better than not finding it at all. But at some point, all of those people, what they have in common is some sort of healing, or like figuring it out. And as you shared, when you went to college and looked around and realized it wasn't really serving you anymore to be the rebel, that is a really interesting thing, because if we could bottle it or define it, it would be incredible to be able to say, well, this is what you need to do. Now, we won't have the answer, because I know that you don't even know, but what things were happening around that time that you do feel like helped you pivot a little bit or make that change?
Yeah, I guess it was really just getting out of that environment. And realizing that, everybody tells you when you're in school, like, these people don't matter, and all of this trauma and drama that you're experiencing, you're just going to look back and it's none of it matters. And yet when you're in it and you care so deeply, and we're biologically wired to not be rejected and to care about what everybody who's surrounding us thinks and does and thinks about us, it's incredibly meaningful. And I don't think any amount of lecturing, certainly it didn't work for me, any amount of lecturing from people who said none of this matters, although I didn't really get that, but it doesn't do any good. So just getting out of the environment, and I guess I was, I wish that I could bottle it up, because like you said, I just decided that I wanted to rebel in kind of the opposite way. I thought, you know what, I'm going to be like a superstar. I'm just going to get straight A's in college. And that's what I did. Like, I just completely became a good student. And I think part of it was just not having to show up as, I wasn't fighting that same battle anymore. It was just kind of taken away from me. So sometimes, the environment plays such a role. And that's why, when people are, I think, addicts, or they're struggling with something, and it's like, don't put yourself in the same places with those same people. Don't go to the same places, because that triggers all that same behavior and those same thoughts and feelings. You got to get away from that. And sometimes that's why I think people aren't unable to escape, is they can't get away from that. They're stuck, as the case with gangs. I mean, we've all seen the movies and the shows. People are stuck in that environment. So it's really hard to change when you're still in it.
Yeah, I do feel that environment plays such a massive role. I always joked, and unless people kind of get this sort of stuff, they'll think it's like super weird. But when I was working at a school for young and parenting moms, so the youngest kids that I worked with that had babies would be around 13 up to 21. And almost always they had really, trying not to paint them all with the same brush, because there were some positive relationships, but mostly they were in toxic relationships with other young men. And I used to joke that if we could create a dating service or an app for them that only good people were on it, that it would be a life-changing thing for them, because I think relationships in that case are massive, and obviously those are connected to our environment. So I always kind of feel that if you could just change someone's relationships and environment, you have a pretty good shot of turning things around. If you leave the relationships and environment the same, when we transition youth out of an addiction center or out of jail, when I know they're going back to the same relationships and same environment, I'm like, man, like I don't care how strong-willed they are at 16. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I'm like, we'll probably see them back. It's going to be a really, really, really surprising thing if they turn it around. And again, people who aren't in that world or haven't really experienced that for themselves have some trouble relating to that, but it might think I'm a negative person. I'm certainly not. I always hope for the best, but it's like I've got nothing else to do but really cross my fingers in that situation. And that's why I'm doing a lot of this work that I'm doing too, which I'm excited to talk about kind of business and then how it relates to kind of sharing an important message like you do so well and stuff like that. Before I do, because you mentioned the OC, I think a lot of people who aren't from there, who saw the TV show, would be kind of really interested in your sharing that you are from there, that you didn't really feel that you fit in though. Did you have any reactions when there was like a pop culture TV series that the whole world was watching?
It's funny because by the time that show came out, I had been out for a long time. But yeah, it didn't surprise me at all. And it was kind of actually sad for me because I lived there when it was just a complete suburb. It was gorgeous. It was not built up. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't a scene. It certainly wasn't like this social media bubble that it is now. So it's kind of hard. I don't even really, to be honest, like going back because, it just doesn't feel like it was when I was real young.
Right. And that's kind of what I was curious about. Like when you mentioned the idea of that, it kind of reminded me of one of my favorite poets, Shane Koizan, who does a lot of great poetry that helps youth with things like dealing with bullying in school, for example, or their own like depression and anxiety. But he won't speak in schools. He hasn't stepped foot in a school in like 15 years because for him, it just brings back too many negative memories. And he used to do like whole tours where he would go speak in schools. And then I had a chance to talk to him after one of his shows once, and he was like, yeah, he's like, I don't think I'll ever go back to a school again. And yeah, I think it's been like 10 or 15 years for that similar reason. Just the bells and whistles and the hallways and lockers bring back enough negative memories for him that he'll meet schools at like conference centers or theaters like local where the schools can take a bus and go, and he'll do shows for schools, of course, but he's like, I don't go into schools. Nobody could pay me enough to go to a school, which is kind of a sad thing. But very connected to what we're talking about, because you had mentioned it doesn't matter if you're between 80 years old or 18 years old when talking about like sort of an audience and people that you would share your message with. That brings me back to one of our earliest topics about business and entrepreneurship, and something that comes up a lot on this show, which is learning from people about niche or like sort of a target audience. And because we in my case, I have a pretty broad topic, the idea of learning and growth mindsets, goal setting maybe, and in your case, I think helping people overcome fear of failure and fear of rejection and stuff could be a really broad topic too. From a business sense or scaling your message, how do you think of the idea of like a niche and customer audience?
I think it's a really smart idea. If you can niche down and very distinctly pick out your customer, I think the better off you are in business. And it's a very scary thing to do, right? Most people, they look at their business and even our topic, it's like, well, who needs your topic? Everyone needs our topic. Everyone gets rejected, the whole planet. So we've kind of, for us, we stay in the sales realm. Certainly, people have told me for years, oh my gosh, kids need this. You could write a kid's book. You could do this. You could do that. And there's no doubt in my mind, but that's for someone else to do. Like, it's just not an avenue I am going down. There's a whole category of people who deal with rejection in romantic relationships. And I've been on a couple podcasts. One, Dr. Aziz, who had it was all about dealing with the insecurity and gaining your confidence. And so we talked about that in relationship to rejection. So there's that whole niche about, dealing with rejection in romantic relationships. So we stay very centered on the business thing. When we first started our business, we specialized in speaking just to the retail industry. So we didn't go out to real estate and financial planning or any entrepreneur stuff. We didn't do any of that. It was just teaching the retail industry sales and customer service, and then go for no. Then finally we said, okay, we're kind of done with that industry. Let's just stay on this topic. So we don't talk about, for the most part, I mean, we certainly don't share this, but we don't talk about really anything else in our speaking, right? It's just this topic. If you want to be an expert today, the more that you can easily explain who you serve and how you do it succinctly, specifically focused, you're going to not appeal to a ton of people, but you're going to appeal so much to the right people that it will be so easy to get their attention.
Where it's tricky for me, that's interesting, is I used to be in sales, and I used to be in sales in fitness and nutrition, and I was pretty good at it. It came somewhat naturally, I guess. I didn't realize at the time, and I've shared this with some guests recently, that I was good at sales, but it was because I had a product that people wanted. I was like, I can put the terminology in place now, right? I was oversubscribed. I just created a good product. People loved it. I was so busy that I couldn't even take on more clients almost. And I was like 20 years old. I didn't realize that I was kind of good at sales, but it was because I had the niche and the audience and the product, the offer, all of the stuff that business gurus would be teaching and creating ebooks about right now. I had that dialed in 20 years ago by accident. What's really challenging is right now being like, I could go do that. I just don't want to. And so as multi-passionate people, I think that you mentioned your love for creating fiction books and the idea of like, you obviously have a lot of different interests. Do you have sort of coping skills or strategies that you put in place to help you stay focused as such a multi-passionate person?
That's a really good question. I mean, one of those things that is in place is just simply the need to make a living. So that kind of dictates, right? You just go like, all right, do the stuff that makes money. And it's easy to lose focus on that because we all want to do like the fun stuff. So, which is typically not the stuff that makes money. I saw this funny meme. It's going to be almost impossible for me to describe to people listening, but it was like this meme. You know what a Venn diagram is, where there's a circle and a circle that intersects it, and then another circle that intersects it, so that in the middle of the diagram, there's all these intersecting circles, and it's like the sweet spot. It contains all of the circles that of all of the stuff that you are and that you want to do. And it's funny, this Venn diagram had this, and then it was like showing how everything that you wanted to do, like for real, like your secret dream was like outside of it. So you're like trying to work inside this diagram, and really all the stuff that you want to do is outside. Somebody once said, a guy that went to one of his seminars once said, everybody has a secret dream. They have the dream that they're working on, and then they have the secret dream. It's like, what would you do if just the shackles were off and that was the thing that you wanted to do? So for me, for Richard and I, we allow ourselves the outlet to work on those secret dreams, to have the freedom to work on those. For a long while, it was, and we decided this is going to be a business. It was after getting really successful with Go for No. And there's a phenomenon, and I know you've seen it. There's this phenomenon, and we were talking about this morning, actually, where you do something and you do it really well, and then it becomes time for you to stop doing that thing and then go teach other people how to do what you did. So for us, it was, we launched our business. We decided to publish this we self-published a short book, and it was called Retail Magic. It sold really well. We sold it direct, not on Amazon, because that didn't even exist. We sold it direct to companies, and we did really well with that. It was a great door opener too, to get people to hire us to do training. So then we wrote Go for No, and Go for No was incredibly unsuccessful at first. For the first few years, it did nothing. It languished. It took 10 years for us to finally get that book on the '1 Amazon sales and selling list. It took 10 years, almost to the day. So we really struggled with that one. And but we kind of learned through that process of how to write and publish short books. And we published a couple other short books in that process. And we ended up working with a guy named Ray, who we convinced to write a version of Go for No for the network marketing industry. And we wrote that. And then Ray came along and he was like, hey, you guys are so good at this. Will you help me write and publish a book? So we did. We did that. And then before you know it, we started a publishing company. We're like, you know what? We're going to write and publish books, because we just had our head turned. We're like, we know how to do this. And also, you know what else we should do? We should teach people. Now that we've done it, let's monetize the knowledge and teach people how to write and publish books and figure out what their book brand is and do all this stuff. So we went down this whole long path of doing this. And it was like, if you're going to do that, you've got to do it full on. And so I'm over here doing Go for No, but also publishing books, and also going to teach people how to write and publish books. It was so crazy. And it was, and so nothing became fulfilling because I'm working on this project, and then I'm jumping over to this project and that project. And so we agonized for a few years over, what do we really like to do? What do we really want to do? And my passion, my love is actually go for no. So I'm like, what am I doing? This is not what I want to be doing. And then underneath all of that is the secret dream that we're not even working on. We're not even doing the secret dream. We're just doing like the stuff that, and I think you kind of suggested this at the beginning. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. That is the biggest thing I've learned on this journey where I am now. Just because I know how to write and publish books, and I have this sounds like, I know I'm patting myself on the back. I have incredible instincts of book titles and subtitles and what people should do. And I'm sure that if I went out there and made a ton of videos, I could command huge fees to help people do this. I don't want to do it like anymore. Even though I'm good at it. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. And I know I went off on some tangents there. So how do you rein yourself in is you let yourself play in the secret dream, and you just keep making sure that you're doing the thing that you really, really want to do for money.
Is it a full secret dream, or are you allowed to share the secret dream?
Oh, the secret dream is still, it's fiction. It's writing fiction, it's writing fictional stories. And we're going to explore like YouTube and making movies. And it's just really being creative without like having to monetize it necessarily.
I did share it about the idea. For me, it was with respect to like personal training, building nutrition plans, all of that kind of stuff. Whenever I see another creator who is following that business model, I'm like, oh, I could do that better. Or I could do it as well. Or holy shit, they made 100K last month. And I was doing that 20 years ago. Like, why aren't I doing that now? And then having to be like, well, because that's not what I want to do right now. And that's okay. For sure is something that I definitely have to battle with. One of the things that did help me a lot was reading Barbara Shear's book called Refuse to Choose. And it was for those people who struggle with niche, but again, need to make a living. And there was one very specific tangible thing in there. And she said you need an idea journal, and you need a couple pens or markers that you really like. And it's very much like how Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way, morning pages, and how as writers, you actually rest by writing your morning pages and getting all that kind of like just whatever it is onto the page. And then you're going to be refreshed when you go to work on your book or work on your blog post. And so this I hadn't heard before, but it was very similar. And it was the idea of like doodling and drawing and sketching and writing, just whatever comes to mind in a diary or a little journal book, all of the business ideas you have and all of the hobby ideas you have, and just putting them in there in any way, shape, or form and closing it, and then kind of getting back to what your current thing that you chose you're going to work on is. And it actually really does help me because every time I do an interview, I think of like 10 ideas. And when I go to pick up my daughter this afternoon or something like that, 3 more are going to pop in my mind because of something that you even said. And if I do 2 or 3 interviews a week, and every time I read a book, I think of 100 ideas, like it's so exponential that I always say if there was a business where I could just sit there and give people ideas, that would be my best skill set. And, as I laugh, people will have said to me over the years, oh, your brain makes my brain hurt. But like sometimes I can't sleep just because the ideas are flowing. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's definitely something that I've had to battle through myself.
Well, I'm married to someone like that. He's the idea person. I'm the executor person, which is good and bad because he'll have all the ideas and then he makes me crazy. But then because I'm the execution person, I'm like, okay, I could do that. I could pull that off. And then I end up doing all these things and going like, this is okay. Now it's no longer possible.
Which is a great segue to, I love that topic of having a co-founder. And that's something that I haven't really been able to talk to people about recently. And then in your case, because, being partners, both in business, but in life, you add like a whole other layer there. talk about the opportunity to write a whole nother book, which maybe we don't have time for today. But whether it's on the relationship side or the business side, I'm sure you could share some things that could really help people who are thinking about either getting into business with a loved one or just going about business on their own versus having a co-founder.
Yeah. So we have thought about writing a book. Of course we have. We've talked about it many times. We even have the title. It's one of those many things that we're going to do at some point. Yeah. So I'll tell you the biggest thing that we've learned, and we learned this a while ago, luckily, thank God. But the biggest thing that we learned was that you have to be willing to give up control, that both of you can't control everything. And I'll also, it really, I think the number one benefit though of being in a partnership with somebody is that you can brainstorm and you can see if you're thinking clearly about something. And what we've kind of learned to do is communicate in such a way that it's like, we're not fighting to be right, we're fighting to get clarity. So it's like, I'm sharing my ideas with you and I don't know where this is going, but I'm not saying this is the path I want to take. I'm just telling you what I'm envisioning. So the other person isn't like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Why would we want to take that path? That's the wrong path. It's like, no, we need to get it. You need to get it all out on the table. I don't know who said it. Some internet marketing guru said, never think alone, which I think that's in many ways true, especially when you're trying to flesh out ideas and see if they make sense. Because sometimes you're stuck in your own head. So that's the benefit. But the thing that we've learned, like I said, the big lesson was give up control, and that you hear a lot, done is better than perfect, right? Just get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect. And as a pair, as a partnership, you learn that different is not necessarily better as well. So when your partner looks at something and goes like, well, I would change the font on that, and I would say it this way. Well, it's only because that's how they would do it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're making it better. So we've kind of learned to just not go crazy over things back and forth, because sometimes we're just making it our way and it's not necessarily better. And I think you experience that even as on your own, right? You keep trying to work at something and work it, and it's like you're just making it different. You're not necessarily making it better.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It probably ties into the fear of failure and fear of success as well. And that sort of cycle, like that, what's the right word? Almost like a merry-go-round that we get trapped in, like the hotel doors, the front, that you just get stuck in the door and you keep spinning because you're getting different types of feedback. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe my brand colors are wrong, or maybe my elevator pitch, it should be different. And then you just, to your point, just keep changing it as opposed to making real progress. When the idea of having someone else to bounce ideas off of, and that you said never think alone, I think is really one of the main reasons why I often think of starting a business pillar or something with someone else. Like, kind of, I think a little tiny bit in the back of my mind, I've always been on this search for almost like a co-founder, or I've been thinking, okay, if I am running this whole business myself for the next rest of life, in what ways can I partner with people? And I feel like it's for that reason, the idea that being able to just have conversations with people is better than sitting in your own office by yourself all the time. It can be lonely, And then the other thing being that when something wrong does happen, then you're able to be like, hey, did you see this? Or, hey, what do you think about this? And then the problem solving piece, I think, is always better with other people. Whether we call it networking or collaboration, the idea of getting to know people on or off the internet, I guess, is something else that would be really cool to add to that curriculum in school that we were talking about. What are some things that you've learned that people who would come to you and be like, I suck at networking, can you teach me how? Where do you start with people like that?
So let me answer this a little bit differently. And because it's not really a problem that I necessarily solve, but I want to share something in relationship to that whole learning thing. And that is that one of the things I learned early on, and it was pretty irritating to me, was that once I finally did graduate, got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, I was so excited to be done with education. Like, I was so done with school. Just never wanted to walk inside, never wanted to take another class in my life. And then over the last 25 years, I've done more education and taken more courses and gone to more conferences than I thought was humanly possible. Like, I had no idea the education that I would get, and that I would be personally paying for all of this education after school. And that's the thing that you don't get told, and you realize very quickly. You will not succeed if you do not, I'm just flat out, you will not succeed if you do not get involved in, whether it's attending conferences, whether it's going to networking meetings and meeting business owners like yourself, whether it's joining the association of where your particular niche is, which I completely think you should do. The education and the conferences. When Go for No was languishing, we had it for like 4 years. We went to this book marketing summit. It was being held by Mark Victor Hansen and I think Jack Canfield as well. They were doing things about publishing books, and they're the authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which is the famous book series with the little stories in it. Anyway, we're sitting, we would take stacks of Go for No books with us and just hand them out to whoever. We were just like, hand them out like candy, like hoping that maybe somebody would read it and like it and something good would happen. And we gave a copy to this, we had one copy left. We gave a copy to this guy who was sitting in front of us, who I had overheard. I hadn't spoken to him at this conference, but I had overheard him talking to somebody else, and he was in sales. So I was like, hey, do you want a copy of our book? He's like, sure. We get a call from him a couple days later. And he says, I read your book. Are you guys open-minded? And we said, yeah, because who doesn't want to be open-minded, right? Yeah, we're open-minded. He's like, okay, I want to give you some feedback. He's like, first of all, I just want you to know, I read all the sales books. He's like, I've read practically every sales book that's ever been written. And quite frankly, now that I know this guy, he has. He was not exaggerating. And he's like, so here's the feedback. You've written one of the best sales books I've ever read. He said, with probably the worst cover in the history of publishing. So I said, oh, okay, good feedback. He's like, are you guys willing to change the cover? And we said, well, based on that, yeah, absolutely. I guess we need to change the cover. He's like, change the cover. And he said, and also if you change the cover, I'll buy 5,000 copies from you. He's like, I just want to give this book out to clients and friends. He's like, everybody should have this book. So that's what we did. We would never have gotten that advice sitting in our office, languishing over what we were going to do. What's wrong? How do we, get the word out about this book, without going to that conference and being willing to just spend the money and the time handing out copies, and then being open-minded enough and willing. Thank God he was willing to give us that feedback too. So that's the why of why you have to get out of your own head, get out there. You learn from people. And there are some courageous people out there who are nice and kind, who are willing to give you the tough feedback. And sometimes it's critical feedback. Sometimes it's just one person, and you can't always take that. And we've learned that from fiction for sure. There are people, I don't like the ending. But when you have a bunch of people saying it, and the evidence was there, right? Our book is good, but it's not selling. So what can we do to fix it? And this guy's telling us it's the cover. So let's just do it, right? We changed the cover, still took 5 years of sending it out, of getting it out, finally putting it on Amazon for any real success to happen. But the book cover changing was the turning point.
Whether prior to the turning point or after the turning point, what do you think kept you going, even though the numbers weren't saying that it was a success?
I guess we both just believed in it so much, and it was just enough good feedback every now and then. I guess it was like getting breadcrumbs through a forest. Every now and then, on a pretty, regular basis, we would get an email Or once it got on Amazon, we'd see a review and it would be like, this book has changed my life. Here's what's happening. And it's like, wow, this is really good. You know, it's not, the results aren't there, but look at this, what this person is saying. And it would be just enough to keep going another few weeks and then get another little bit of feedback. So we were lucky in that way that we were getting that feedback, you know, and if you're not, and if you have something and it's not resonating, it could be maybe that you're just not putting it out there enough. And sometimes I think you really have to ask for that feedback. And there's been other stuff that we've done that, it just wasn't as successful. And we've kind of done autopsies on those and looked and tried to learn, okay, what did we do different? Why wasn't this as successful? And those things are just opportunities to learn and try again and do something different.
Yeah, almost everyone you look back at, whether it's a business, depending on how much cash you're spending, obviously you need to figure it a little quicker maybe, but like certainly with the content world, YouTube channel, blog posts, social media following, definitely podcast maybe leads the charge in terms of this. It's really hard to grow early on. And then as consumers, we see a YouTube channel that has, 1.2 million subscribers. And you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. But then you look at their first 299 videos and like almost close to zero people watched them. And you have to wonder, like, what made them post the 300th one that actually ended up being life-changing? And so often we never get to see that that's what happened. It's really inspiring to hear that you believed in your concept with the book so much that you kept going, because I'm working on a book right now. That's really what I'm trying to do, is make sure that the book is exactly that. Like, even if it only sells one copy, I think it will change that person's life. And then 7 years from now, even if it's only sold 7 copies, then I still will be proud to be like, hey, you should read this because it's a good book. And if it ends up getting success someday in terms of our traditional metrics, awesome. But if it doesn't, it's still, we talked about it earlier, it's still worth it, I guess.
Well, I mean, and if you don't mind, just a couple things on that too. I mean, one is you just can't give up so soon. And I think most people do, especially on books, is people release them. They kind of give like the honeymoon phase is 6 months to a year. And then for a lot of people who are in the book world, who are speakers, coaches, whatever, it's like, okay, on to the next book. And for us, it was like, no. We want this book to sell 1 million copies. So we're in this for the long haul.
Yeah, and that's exactly, it's so timely for me and for a lot of other people listening, and for when I'll share with people in my email list, because they are getting to see a little bit of my sort of build in public with the book. For 20 years, people say, why don't you write a book? For me, I didn't have the right thing that I wanted to do yet. And now that I do, that I feel like I can stand behind it, it makes more sense. So I'm starting to share it and what I'm working on. But just as, or even more important than me, the people who learn from that, I think really showing them that this is just so perfect, because it's that idea that of going for no, and that there will be some failure involved in this for sure. I'm already bought into that. I don't necessarily want to leave it as the only possibility, because you mentioned Tony Robbins saying that success leaves clues. So there's a version of, hey, maybe we can learn from other people. And this is exactly it. It's super meta, but learning from your journey will be really helpful to other people to, as you said, not just move on to the next book. Because that's definitely, if you asked me probably 2 years ago, a year ago, that's kind of where my mindset probably would have been. Oh, I'm going to try the first book, almost like I'm getting it out of the way, because the first book's not going to be successful. So I got to get to the second and the third, because we kind of, from the top down, see that sort of data, right? Or people will say that my first 2 books didn't sell, my third finally did. But maybe that's because they didn't stick with the first, which is just such a interesting topic that we could, again, never find the answer to, which is awesome. The idea of co-authoring a book was one other thing that I did want to ask about, because that's one of my other quote unquote genius ideas that I've put in my journal, is the idea of that being a way that I could fulfill my need to work with people. in my case, I wasn't thinking of writing it with my wife per se. Maybe we do one, but a lot of the people that I've collaborated with through the podcast will reach out even a year later and say, hey, we should do something sometime, maybe a workshop or just even creating a piece of content again together, doing a second interview, what have you. One of those things that's always been rattling around in my mind is the idea of doing co-authored books. In that case, mostly probably with people who weren't going to write a book anyways, right? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how difficult that could be, but kind of the pros and cons, what your thoughts are.
It's funny you'd bring that up, because in the category of we've done it, so now we're going to teach it, we actually wrote a book called $1 Million Book Formula, and we talked about what makes a book successful long term. And I've written a few blog posts on this, and one of the blog posts I wrote actually was on having a co-author and the pros and cons of having a co-author. I think the biggest pro is you get two perspectives. It's an easier writing process because you can go back and forth, and hopefully you have somebody you can jive with, and you can kind of get the same vision and get the same tone. Or there was a great book called Younger Next Year, where there was a guy who was a doctor and a guy who was just trying to get healthy and lose weight. And they went back and forth through this entire book. So you'd have the doctor give his perspective and the guy who's losing weight and trying to get healthy and get his perspective. And so that worked really well. I think you can do some really creative things with a co-author. And obviously you have to share the royalties, but you also get to have a second person who's out there marketing the book, which is really most of the battle of I think, a book these days. The tools and technology for writing and publishing are out there, and it makes it so easy. The barrier to entry now is so low compared to when we started and had to figure out like publishing without having any on-demand tools or anything. But the marketing part. So instead of having one person who could go on podcasts, there's two of you, and two of you can write interviews, and two of you can blog, and two of you can put videos out. So you just get kind of double the marketing effort, which is really powerful.
Yeah, it's something that has really just come to mind for me the last 12 months. But then again, these wheels get spinning and I'm like, okay, so it should be maybe my company is a publishing company on educational books that don't suck. The teen self-help genre, that's what we're going for.
I love that idea, but
yeah, well,
that's just me.
Yeah, well, it's again, there's so many ideas.
It's one of many, right?
That's the thing, right? But I do think to an extent it will come to fruition. Again, I work with a lot of people through the podcast who have, large audiences who love having their ideas out there, but writing a book is just, they're never going to do it. They never have plans to do it. So to me, it's almost like a hybrid between ghostwriting.
Yeah.
But I know that they would get excited about it because they haven't actually tried writing a book. And once they try with support, almost like ghostwriting, it could really work fairly well.
Well, can I give you a tip on exactly how to write it?
Yes. And yes, go ahead.
Okay. You just tell them, you say, all I want to do is just interview you and just ask them a bunch of questions, right? Get the transcript. Now you've got the content for your book. You craft the entire book around everything, your take and what you learned from them. Easy.
Done. So it's like a 1 hour project, right?
Exactly. maybe 3 or 4 max.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I had thought about that. But when I was going to add there, when I said yes, but, and then I let you go ahead, was because the last question I was going to ask was, you said very quickly that it's better to write with someone else because you get two voices. And I was going to say, if you can figure out how to collaborate, do you have tips? And maybe that is the tip, but let's say it was much more of a 50-50 thing. My wife and I decide we want to write a book about parenting an adopted child, or I want to partner with let's say you and I, you said that it's for someone else to write the Go for No book for kids. You and I want to do the teen self-help for kids. Like, what is the strategy to do it? Is you just open up a Google Doc and start typing?
Right. That is the tricky part. So someone has to take the lead. That's what we've learned. And Richard, of the two of us, he takes the lead, starts with the blank page. But when we wrote our Go for No for Network Marketing book with Ray Higdon, what we did was we created the book and we had a bunch of sections. And then we said, Ray, we want to get your take, we call it Ray's take, on this topic. So we would have a section on like failing your way to success. We would have a section on setting goals for the number of no's you're going to collect, right? So we would ask Ray, like, okay, what do you think about getting no's in your business? And did you do this in your business? And so we just collected, we actually just interviewed him again these days, right? Do the interview, get the transcript. We interviewed him. He would tell a couple stories, make a couple points. So it would be our content. So we would have a few pages, and then it would be like, okay, what does Ray, who's our expert, because we're not experts in this industry, what does he think about all this, right? And so we'd have a page from him. Then we move on to the next chapter. Here's all of our content. And then here's what Ray, the expert, says. I think for a parenting book, again, you can be really creative, but for a parenting book, somebody takes the lead, you write kind of an objective piece of chapter one, objective piece of content, and then here's mom's take and here's dad's take. Right? For every issue, mom's takes, dad's take. Every next chapter, mom's take, dad's take, right? You kind of go back and forth because obviously the mom and the dad, right? You guys have very different perspectives on whatever the issues are. Now, when it comes to forming your chapters, I'll just add this in. What are these issues? What are the chapters? So I just put on your I know nothing hat and say, if I were interested in adopting, what are like the 10 to 12 most burning questions that I have? How do I even get started? What qualifications do I need? What if I have past issues, trauma, embarrassing things in my, history? You list these questions out, right? And then those become basically your chapter headings. Whether you form those as questions or not, you could rephrase those so they're not questions, like what to do if you have a checkered past or something, right? And you have the content, and then you have, each of you kind of commenting on this chapter. So that's like the easiest way to do it. I love starting with questions because your brain wants to answer them, and it's easy to do. So you can just go forever sometimes.
Like you said, never think alone. And coming up with questions, I feel like that's one thing that's fun to do on social media, but these days you can just ask your robots.
That's right. Ask your robot.
They'll help you generate some pretty good questions. This has been so good. I wrote down $1 Million Book Formula because there's a lot of content out there on social media. I guess that's pretty much where I see it, obviously, socials, but just in general about the fact that books are such a good way to kind of quote unquote make money or open up speaking gigs. And we see that right in line with start creating vertical videos that are 8 seconds because those go viral the most. And this whole debate around like modern marketing versus like something super traditional like a book, it's just fascinating and I think amazing how much of I don't even know if it's a comeback because it hasn't really gone away, but how big books still are and seem to be big. So like it is such an awesome thing for people still to create. And I think it's kind of almost somehow still underrated, but I know we can't go into that whole topic like too much more. That really helps people a lot. I jotted down how to have coping skills when it comes to fear of failure and fear of success. And like, that's a huge part of your background. Just tips on business that you've learned the hard way over the years. If people want to be speakers and you share that wasn't necessarily where you felt as strong earlier on, like obviously you've grown as a public speaker, and then sales and how to sell, I think, is something that people really struggle with. But when people like you share on that topic, it can be so valuable. I list all of these things because on the show, we can never get around to discussing all of the awesome stuff in detail. And to be respectful of your time, but also to make sure that the audience has kind of like a cadence to episodes. So, I usually keep them around the same length. I feel like it's always worth it a year later to do episode 2. And I feel like there's going to be so many repeat guests over the years. But before I do the rapid fire questions, as I reflected on that sort of list and stuff, if you were to log off of this episode and think, oh, I do wish I kind of mentioned that this time around, is there anything that comes to mind, or do you think we just completed it all already?
Yeah, the only thing that I would, I guess, add, and that was a really good summation, and you're right, there is so much more content that we could share, is really from a go for no perspective, what I want people to walk away with, what I always want them walk away with is in the moment that you are faced with the opportunity to ask someone something, anything, for a job, for a chance, for an opportunity, for more money, whatever, is take that shot, go for no, because the worst thing that could happen is you get a no, but at least you won't live with regret of what would have happened had you asked. So have the courage to ask, and remember that every yes you ever got required the courage to face a no. So you have that in you.
Boom. Pretty much a mic drop. And I'm starting to think that regret is one of the most devastating things we all deal with. A quick follow-up to that I would probably log off thinking, I wish, because I'm curious about that, I asked, is where does the idea, I thought of this earlier when you mentioned the idea of go for no for relationships. Where does the idea, whether it's in business or relationships or both, of like sort of playing hard to get fit into this strategy?
Yeah, it's actually it's not something that we teach a lot of, but it is actually a huge piece of it, in that when you are super confident and you are totally okay with no, even if you say, hey, I'm like totally good if it's a no, feel free to tell me no, that gives people a lot of confidence in you and builds trust, I feel like. And so people are a lot more attracted to that. So when you put it out there that your answer, it's like if you had said, hey, Andrea, do you want to come on my podcast? And if you just can't find the time, totally fine. Just tell me no. Makes me say, oh, well, actually, yes. It's like, it is kind of a reverse psychology thing. So being very open to accepting no, I think is a huge part of how you attract those yeses, because of your internal posture.
Very well put. Talk about counterintuitive advice that I feel like, again, we're so close to it, but really, really could be life-changing for people. So thank you for sharing all of this. The rapid fire questions are always fun because they kind of create a through line through all the episode. It'll be fun to make a little piece of content around them someday. And the first one is just something that you yourself are actively learning right now.
Oh gosh, AI technology. I'm learning a ton of AI tools right now. Voice to text to voice, video stuff, all that.
Yeah, aren't we all? That'll be episode 3.
Yeah.
One piece of advice for the next generation. Like, you have so much wisdom and you've shared a lot of great advice. Certainly we know the concept of going for no. If you were to just leave one piece of advice, though, for the next generation in life in general, what would that be?
Oh gosh, I would say don't be, it sounds so cliche from somebody who's old, but it's don't be in such a hurry. Like, enjoy the process, because this is your life. And I was in such a hurry to grow up. I was so excited to graduate high school, then graduate college, then get a job. I was so excited to just be in my 20s, then out of my, and now I'm like, what I would not give to be 25 and to have more time. So just enjoy the time you have.
If you were to be leading the interview, you ask me a question that comes to mind. It could be, again, on these topics or completely off. I'm an open book. So if you were to ask me a question, what's something that you would ask?
I would ask you, what is it that makes you so curious about other people's stories? Like, you seem like a really curious person.
Kind of interestingly, probably goes back to what you shared earlier about not really being able to bottle something or really define it per se. But I do think that one of the reasons why I love working with people is because of the mutual benefit to it. Like, I hope that when having good interviews or learning from people, that it also is a positive for them. And it, again, it's kind of counterintuitive and almost hard to explain, but it's just fun for both of us when people are genuinely curious in each other. And that can be tough as a podcast host sometimes because, I think we live in such a transactional world that people think like, okay, well, like, he's trying to sell this book or whatever, these different reasons to do a podcast. Like if we made an ebook about why you should have a podcast, we're probably going to talk about it from a marketing and business perspective. But just the genuine curiosity of anyone, for me, is, I guess, enjoyable, but I hope that it's enjoyable for both people. The other thing is that at somewhere along the lines, I very similar to what you shared earlier about there's like a right way to do school. You're trying to get to that finish line, and once you're done learning. Like I had that exact same experience, and maybe 5 to 10 years after that, I remember just learning that no matter who someone is, we can learn from them and then apply it to our own lives in our own way. Or in my case, what I do with this show is as a conduit, like be able to pay it forward to someone else. And so that's probably one of the biggest reasons why, is the idea of there's probably blind spots or things I didn't think of. And I want to just keep that part of my brain like as active as possible. And I'll share one quick story from a previous episode with Sister Helen Prejean. We talked about the idea that she worked on death row. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the movie Dead Man Walking, but it's about her life. And to have an Oscar award-winning movie about your life when you're in the first couple of years of your career is pretty fascinating, because she's been doing that work for 30 years since. And we talked about that, right? Like she had 2 clients at that time, and she's had 14 now. So, but one of her biggest learnings was that even if we are, we've done really, really, really bad things and we're on death row, there's probably the majority, almost all of our character is still really positive, and we can learn from people like that if we're willing to. So I've always kind of felt like that as well.
I love it.
I appreciate you so much for taking the time to do this. It really means a lot. It was a fun conversation, and I look up to the work that you do and everything that you put out on social media. So keep that going. And the final question is always, if people wanted to support your work, where they should go right now.
I would just Google Go For Now. We're everywhere. We're well branded. We've been around a while.
And that's one thing I was going to say earlier about you sticking with that book. The title was always perfect. The cover maybe needed some changing, but I think that that's one of the reasons why it really did take off.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. It was super, super fun.
Thank you so much.